Every once in a while, I meet a trader whose story is so familiar, it feels like I'm hearing my own echo through someone else's timeline. This week, I sat down with a man who's been trading for 10 years. A decade of charts, sleepless nights, blown accounts, and silent mornings where the only sound is the chart ticking against his heartbeat. Before I hit record, I asked him one question. What's kept you in this for 10 years? He laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the answer had changed so many times over the years. At first, he said, it was greed. Then it became passion, then obsession. Now I think it's identity. It's who I am. That line hit me. Because most traders never realize that they don't trade markets anymore. They trade their own reflection inside the market. He called himself disciplined. He said, I've read every book, built every plan, used every stop-loss rule. I've done everything right. But as he spoke, I saw it. That silent exhaustion, the kind that comes not from lack of effort, but from the death of meaning. Because what he really meant was, I've been disciplined without direction. I've been consistent in doing what doesn't transform me. You see, that's the paradox of discipline in trading. Everyone praises it, everyone preaches it, but few ever stop to ask, discipline toward what? He told me how he'd wake up every morning at 4:30 a.m., how he journaled, back-tested, prayed, meditated, but still, he'd end the week flat or negative. I thought if I worked harder, the market would respect that, he said, but it doesn't. And that's when I leaned in and told him what I tell every trader who confuses discipline with structure. The market doesn't reward effort. It rewards alignment. He paused. His eyes narrowed like he was hearing a truth he'd been circling for years. What do you mean by alignment? He asked. I said, alignment means your system, your psychology, and your identity all move in one direction. It means you don't fight yourself while trading. He sighed. That's the thing. I always feel like I'm fighting myself. Exactly. Because most traders build systems that contradict their emotional design. They copy methods that don't fit their mental structure, then blame discipline when it falls apart. So I asked him, when you lose, what's the emotion that hits first? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, shame. Not anger, not fear. Shame because I know I should be better by now. And that's the wound most traders carry, the guilt of knowing better but not being better. It's not ignorance that destroys them, it's internal contradiction. He told me, I've built discipline, but it feels hollow. I told him, that's because discipline built on punishment is just emotional self-harm disguised as control. He looked down, silent. I could almost hear the decade of unspoken struggle in that moment. I went on. Discipline without structure leads to burnout. Structure without identity leads to inconsistency. But when structure is designed around who you are, discipline becomes automatic. You no longer force consistency, you become it. He nodded slowly, like the idea was landing deeper than words could explain. You see, traders glorify willpower. They think if they grind hard enough, they'll eventually force results out of chaos. But the truth is, chaos doesn't respond to force. It responds to structure. When I asked him about his routines, he smiled and said, they're perfect on paper, but when I get hit emotionally, it's like none of that matters. That's because most traders design routines to look disciplined, not to function structurally. They don't design habits to regulate emotion. They design habits to suppress it. So, I asked him to walk me through one of his losing days. He said, okay, London session, setup was valid. I got in, it moved against me a bit. I cut early, then it reversed and hit my original target. I froze, then tried to re-enter, and that's when it started falling apart. I ended the day in drawdown. The structure was fine, but I wasn't. And there it was. The truth every disciplined trader avoids. The structure isn't fine if it collapses under the weight of your emotion. Because structure isn't a strategy, it's a nervous system design. It's how your behavior holds under tension. I told him, every time you break your rule, you're not failing. You're receiving feedback on what your structure can't yet contain. He looked up, processing that. So my mistakes are feedback? Yes, I said. Mistakes are the market exposing your lack of internal structure. It's not punishment, it's precision. He leaned back and whispered, then maybe I've been interpreting feedback as failure. Exactly. And that interpretation is what burns traders out. You see, when you frame your mistakes as moral failures instead of structural feedback, you weaponize discipline against yourself. You turn trading into self-judgment instead of self-evolution. He said, "So I've been trying to fix behavior that's really just exposing my design flaws." "Exactly," I replied. "You don't fix behavior, you redesign structure." He went silent again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy. It was transformative. You could feel the weight shifting from self-blame to self-awareness. That's the turning point. When traders stop trying to control themselves and start learning to design themselves. He said, I used to think if I just stayed disciplined long enough, I'd break through. But maybe I was just staying stuck in a more organized form of chaos." I smiled. That's exactly it. Most traders evolve their methods, but not their model of self. They scale systems that were never stable within. And that's when the conversation took a deeper turn. He asked, "So what's the real foundation of discipline?" I said, "It's not control. It's clarity. Clarity of who you are. Clarity of what your model represents. Clarity of how your structure behaves under volatility. Because once clarity exists, discipline isn't something you chase. It's something you express." He looked at me like he'd just seen something he'd been missing for 10 years. "So it's not about holding on tighter. It's about designing lighter," I said. "You've been carrying chaos by force. Now it's time to command it through design." That's when he sat up and said quietly, "Then maybe I've been the variable all along." And that's when I told him, "Exactly. You are not just in the market. You are the market in motion. The chaos you see on the chart is just a mirror of your internal order. When you organize yourself, your results follow." He didn't speak again for a while, just nodded slowly, eyes glassy, like something deep inside finally found language. And that's when I realized something about traders like him, and maybe like you. After a decade of struggle, they don't need new strategies. They need a new architecture of self, because no amount of discipline can substitute for structural alignment. And this is where it always ends up. The truth that's been there since the beginning. The market doesn't test your patience, it tests your design. He said, "So all this time, I've been trying to prove my worth to the market." I interrupted gently, "No, you've been trying to prove your worth to yourself through the market." He exhaled, long and heavy. That's exactly it. That's why traders chase perfection. That's why they obsess over rules, journals, confirmations. Because deep down, they're seeking emotional validation, not technical mastery. He said, "So what's the answer?" And I said, "The answer isn't to become more disciplined. It's to become more designed. Build a system that understands you better than your impulses do. Create a structure that protects you from your own emotional volatility." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like freedom." I replied, "It is. Because freedom isn't found in the absence of rules. It's found in the presence of structure that makes rules effortless." He sat back, and I could see it, the internal shift. The conversation wasn't about trading anymore. It was about identity, about the architecture behind every decision he'd ever made. As we wrapped up, I told him, "When the trader evolves, the results follow, not the other way around." He said, "So all this time, I was waiting for results to make me disciplined." I said, "Yes, but real discipline comes from identity, not outcome." When he left, he shook my hand and said, "This wasn't an interview. It was a mirror." And he was right, because every conversation like this one reminds me, we don't trade markets. We trade models of ourselves, the ones we either consciously build or unconsciously repeat. And the moment you realize that, discipline stops being a battle and becomes a design. That's how traders evolve from chaos to command. That's how they stop trying to survive the market and start shaping it from the inside out. Because at the end of every chart, behind every trade, beneath every failure, lies the same silent truth. You don't need more control. You need more clarity.